Hi everyone, and welcome to the last presentation on the Structural Racism Framework, citation below as always. And this is now part 4, the conclusion of the video series on structural racism. So far in this video series, we've been going over all the different parts of the structural racism framework. We've covered the context in terms of the dominant consensus on race. We've also gone over the current manifestations in terms of social and institutional dynamics. And as you can see, there are arrows from each of these parts leading to the outcomes of concern in terms of the racial disparities we've been talking about. There are two aspects in particular with regard to these outcomes. The first is all the racial inequalities in current levels of well-being. We'll talk about this more in class, but there's evidence that there are disparities when it comes to health outcomes and mental health outcomes. We've already talked about disparities in wealth accumulation, and all of that in combination to everything above is related then to the undermining of the capacity of individuals and communities of color to improve their situations, which then helps us to understand how all of this builds to create the ongoing racial inequalities that we see today. So to end this series, I just want to put up this quote by Powell, who says, "We are increasingly moving toward a racial hierarchy without racist actors." I'd like you to pause the video and think about what this means. How can we have a system that perpetuates racial hierarchies and inequalities without actual racist actors necessarily being involved? And this is what the structural racism actually allows us to see. It recognizes that racism does not need to be individualistic or even intentional. Institutional and cultural practices can perpetuate race inequality without relying on racist actors. So according to the structural racism approach, we have to evaluate the fairness of the structures and their arrangements by how they function and the outcomes they create. So when we look at things within this framework of structures and opportunities, then we can focus on social actions that maximize access to opportunity. So that, in a very large nutshell, is the structural racism framework. Thank you for watching, and bye.